My adopted son called me Mom at Thanksgiving, and my father lost it. He said I didn't deserve the title because I never gave birth. It was one of those Sunday dinners that tried to feel warm and cozy, like a muted Hallmark movie. But underneath it all were layers of judgment, pressure, and that quiet kind of parental disapproval that stings more than yelling ever could. The dining room looked the same as it always had when I was a kid: Mom's roast chicken, Dad's overly buttery mashed potatoes, and the same awful crocheted table runner my grandma gave me when I was 16. It had never disappeared. My sister Phoebe was glowing before she even said a word, sitting there in a lilac sweater like she'd just stepped out of a maternity ad. Her fingers twitched at the waistband of her pants, as if guarding her barely there baby bump from any sharp words, or from life itself. Then she said it. Her voice shook slightly, and her husband Nate squeezed her hand under the table. She looked up and announced they were expecting. Just like that, no let up, no big scene, no dessert first. Just 3 words that changed the room instantly: "We're having a baby." My mother actually screamed, then cried. The kind of deep, emotional sobbing that only comes when a person's entire soul spills out. My father stood, walked to Phoebe, and gave her one of those rare, respectful hugs. The kind that made you wonder if there had ever been a softer, more human version of him. Then came the sentence. The one that knocked the air out of me and still echoes like an empty room. He stepped back, turned to Mom, and said, "Now this is what real success looks like." I don't think he meant to hurt me. He said it like someone cheering for a winning touchdown or a coach celebrating a big win. But the second those words left his mouth, something in me collapsed. Something ancient and tired. Still, I smiled. I grinned because I'm good at it. I've sat in sterile doctors' offices wearing paper gowns that rip too easily while strangers tell you your eggs are done, your uterus is incooperative, your body just doesn't work right. I smiled because the last time I cried in front of them, my mom handed me herbal tea and said, "Maybe it's all in your head." So I smiled. What else was I supposed to do? Throw my plate across the table? Scream about hormone injections, surgeries, and miscarriages they never knew about? Tell them that once, at 12 weeks, I miscarried in a Walgreens bathroom stall while no one answered their phone? I smiled. I clinked my wine glass to theirs. I told Phoebe I was happy for her, and in a way, I was. It wasn't her fault. She didn't ask to be the favorite. She didn't build the pedestal they put her on. Maybe she didn't even want to be on it. But the fire inside me kept burning, because the truth stayed the same. I was 38, infertile, and to my parents, a failure. You know what hurts most? They knew. They knew what I'd been through. They sat in the hospital waiting room after my ectopic pregnancy almost killed me. They brought casseroles after my 3rd failed IVF, when I couldn't stop crying. They watched me spend 5 years of savings chasing a dream that never came true. They knew it all. But now Phoebe was pregnant, so none of that mattered. Phoebe, who once said she didn't want kids until she turned 40. Phoebe, who got pregnant 6 months after her wedding without even trying. Her life unfolded perfectly, like a rehearsed play. After dinner, I stayed behind to clean while everyone crowded around Phoebe in the living room, hands on her stomach like it held wishes. I washed dishes quietly, letting the water run too long, pretending to be busy so I wouldn't have to hear them toss around baby names like stock options. When I finally got into my car that night, the cold hit so hard I couldn't breathe. I started the engine, stared at the empty driveway, and whispered something I hadn't said in months. "They think I'll never be a mother." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They were wrong. My pupils narrowed, and something deep in me lit up. Small, raw, and angry. Dead wrong. When you fight the same battle over and over, eventually a strange silence sets in. Not peaceful, but aching, like your body still remembers the war even after it ends. After my last failed IVF, I didn't cry or break anything. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at a single red dot on the sheet, and knew it was over, not because of the doctors, not because of money, but because something inside me whispered for the first time, enough. For months afterward, I drifted through life like a ghost. I went to work. I replied to texts. I fake laughed at baby showers while feeling empty inside, like a scooped-out Halloween pumpkin. I deleted all the fertility apps. I packed away the baby onesies I'd bought in hopeful moments. Someone had given me a tiny crocheted hat, just in case. I buried the ultrasound photo in my nightstand. Then I threw the box in the attic, shut the door, and told myself I was done. But being done doesn't mean the pain disappears. Grief lingers in strange places. I cried at dog food commercials. I avoided the diaper aisle like it was dangerous. Then one night at 3 a.m., I was scrolling through my phone looking for something, anything. A purpose, a reason to get out of bed. I found a local mentoring program at a youth shelter called Haven House. It wasn't fancy, chipped paint, flickering hallway lights, and worn-out couches, but it felt warm in a quiet, honest way. So I signed up. At first, the kids didn't know what to make of me. I don't blame them. I was just another adult who showed up smiling and probably wouldn't stay. But I did. I kept showing up, week after week. I played board games, read books, helped with math homework, and tried not to cry in the parking lot afterward. Some of those kids, even at 8 years old, had already lived through more pain than most people face in a lifetime. They didn't need me to fix anything. They just needed someone who wouldn't leave. That's how I met Jamal. He was 10, always sitting alone in a corner with his hoodie pulled up and a notebook in his lap. He didn't talk much, but he noticed everything. And when he spoke, it came out sharp and careful, like he'd been saving every word. By the third week, he was calling me Miss K, a simple name that somehow made my heart ache. He acted like he didn't need anyone, but you could tell, he did. He needed someone to ask why he never smiled in pictures. Someone to notice when he got too quiet. Later I found out his mom had died of an overdose 2 years earlier. His dad had moved to another state, started a new life, and left him behind. Most people didn't understand how alone Jamal really was. Maybe that's why we clicked. Because I was alone, too. I started going more often. For more than 3 years, I showed up at that shelter almost every day, about 400 days a year. I brought snacks, board games, books. I taught him how to make scrambled eggs without burning them and how to sew on a button. We built cardboard cities, folded paper airplanes, and created daily routines. Some days, he'd just sit beside me and say nothing. That was fine. Other days, he'd talk nonstop, telling me all about school and classmates. Thanksgiving had arrived, and the emotions were high. My adopted son had called me Mom, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my father's judgment come crashing down on me. His words were sharp and deliberate, as he told me I didn't deserve the title because I never gave birth. The air around the dining room table, set up like it had been when I was a child, was tense, and underneath the warm and fuzzy exterior of the holiday gathering, I felt a cold undercurrent of parental condemnation. The table was familiar: Mom's roast chicken, Dad's mashed potatoes with more butter than anyone needed, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. My grandmother's crocheted table runner, a gift she'd given me when I was 16, still adorned the table, never quite fitting into the space, much like my place in this family. And then Phoebe, my sister, glowing as always, announced that she was expecting. Her voice trembling, she shared the news casually, as if the words, "We're having a baby," had no more weight than a simple statement. Mom screamed, tears pouring from her eyes, and Dad stood to embrace her, his rare show of affection soft and reverent. Then came his words, the ones that struck me like a blow to the chest. "Now this is what real success looks like." I smiled, of course, like I always did. I smiled because it was easier than anything else, easier than confronting the sharp pain of infertility, the miscarriages, the countless failed rounds of IVF, the hospital rooms, and the years spent trying to conceive, only to be told my body was not working the way it was supposed to. I smiled because what else was there to do? I watched as my family celebrated Phoebe, while I sat at the edge of the table, clinking my wineglass and offering congratulations I didn't feel, at least not for them. I was 38, infertile, and to them, a failure. They knew what I'd gone through. They were there when I miscarried, when I spent everything I had on a dream that would never come true. But Phoebe was pregnant, and none of it mattered anymore. After dinner, I lingered in the kitchen, washing dishes, hiding from the conversation in the living room about baby names and strollers. I leaned against the sink, letting the water run, trying to drown out the sound of my own emotions. When I finally left, the cold air hit me like a slap in the face, but there was a spark inside me, an undeniable truth that burned with fierce determination. They were wrong. I wasn't finished. Not yet. For months, I had been grieving. It wasn't just the failed pregnancies or the inability to have children. It was the realization that I had been measuring my worth against something that wasn't in my control. The weight of my family's expectations pressed down on me, but even after everything, I couldn't give up. I found a new sense of purpose in unexpected places. I found myself at a shelter, volunteering at Haven House, a small, worn-out facility offering support to children in need. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. There, I met Jamal, a 10-year-old boy who had been through more pain and loss than anyone should have to endure. His mother had died of an overdose, and his father had disappeared, leaving Jamal to fend for himself. Despite his quiet exterior, he had a fire inside him, a longing for connection, and slowly, we began to form a bond. It wasn't instant, but by the third week, Jamal called me Miss K. It was simple, but every time he said it, it felt like a promise. And one day, after a particularly hard day, he asked me, "Can I be with you forever?" In that moment, everything I thought I knew about myself shifted. I realized that I had something I hadn't known I was looking for, someone to love, someone who needed me just as much as I needed him. The adoption process was long and exhausting. I had to jump through hoops, proving myself again and again to a system that seemed to think I wasn't enough. But I kept pushing through. My family had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't tell them. They would never understand. They were too wrapped up in Phoebe's pregnancy, too consumed with the idea that success was measured by biology. Finally, after months of paperwork, background checks, and home visits, Jamal was mine. It didn't matter that we didn't share DNA. He was my son, in every way that counted. But I kept it to myself. I wasn't ready for the judgment, the questions, the sympathy disguised as concern. Then, Thanksgiving arrived, and I knew I couldn't keep the secret any longer. I drove to my parents' house with Jamal in the backseat, his hands folded nervously in his lap. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't told them about the adoption yet. I wasn't sure how they would react. But Jamal had already become my son, and I couldn't deny that anymore. When we walked into the house, it felt as though nothing had changed. The living room was loud with chatter, the TV playing a game no one cared about, and Phoebe, of course, was there with her baby, dressed like she was hosting a cooking show. I felt invisible as I stood near the back, clutching the paperwork that made it official. No one noticed me, not at first. But I had come for a reason, to finally let them see me, to finally show them that I had found my own version of success. The baby shower decorations were as perfect as the image Phoebe projected, and the cake, with its inscription, "Finally a true mother in the family," hit me like a punch in the stomach. But I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I leaned in closer to the cake. Close enough that no one could hear me, and whispered, "We'll see about that." That night, as I watched Jamal interact with my family, I felt the truth settle in. We may not share blood, but we were a family. We chose each other, and that was enough. This is a beautifully written and emotionally intense story that touches on the themes of family dynamics, adoption, and the quiet strength of a mother's love. The narrative captures the complicated emotions of the protagonist as she navigates a life that doesn't fit the typical mold her family expects. The moment when her son, Jamal, calls her Mom in front of her family becomes a pivotal point, not just in the story, but in her own journey of self-acceptance and defiance against a family that doesn't understand her choices. The tension between societal norms and personal truth is palpable, and the protagonist's determination to carve out her own identity as a mother, without the biological connection, is compelling. The final moments, where she leaves the family gathering with Jamal, reaffirm her choice to prioritize their bond over her family's expectations. This type of story resonates deeply with themes of resilience, the fight for respect, and redefining what family truly means. The quiet yet powerful ending, with Jamal calling her Mom, encapsulates the emotional release that the protagonist has been waiting for, demonstrating that love and parenthood are about choice and commitment, not just biology. It's a moving narrative that invites readers to reflect on their own definitions of family and the complex relationships that shape us. Would you like any further adjustments to the script?